Go. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Out of Nowhere. Well, I've got a terrific guest on my show today. It's over 2 years since he was last on the show, and that's because I last met him in Hull in 23. I think it was about September, something like that, 2023. So we've a lot to catch up to this time again. His name is Peter Robbins. Peter is an investigator, writer, author, lecturer whose writing and research are focused on the subject of truly anomalous UFOs and the implication for humanity. He has appeared as a guest and has been consulted on numerous radio shows, television programs, documentaries. He's also hosts a live weekly 2-hour radio show, talk show, Meanwhile Here on Earth, the UNX network, Close Encounters, and the UAP experiences. Can we please welcome Peter to the show? Hello there. Your mic's gone off.
It does that sometimes. It's great to see you, Bob.
It's nice to see you too. Suppose let's get on a bit. Yeah. There's lots been happening regarding the general interest in, particularly interest in the scientific interest in UAPs and UAPs subject since you were last on as a guest on the show. Can you talk a bit about the changes in the way the subject is now covered regarding and compared to only a few years ago?
Yeah, good question, Bob. Well, as we know, ridicule has been the way that the subject has been generally addressed by the establishment. And that went on almost unabated for the first 70 years or so. And then things changed. They began to change in a markedly noticeable way at the end of 2017. I don't know if it was the cause or just happenstance and they appeared at the right time, but a pair of articles in the New York Times on Sunday, December 17th, 2017, by very distinguished American journalists involving the so-called Tic Tac case, witnesses, and starting on page one, a real rarity for the New York Times. And rather than respond with ridicule, other media kind of followed suit, first in the States and then Europe and beyond. And then we started to see the beginning of our congressional committees looking into the subject of UAPs, UFOs. So I guess, if this was some years ago and we were doing this interview, if there was somebody in the audience who was an academic or scientist or an attorney or a physician, somebody, with proud establishment credentials who did take the subject seriously, they would never say so in public. It could compromise their career. Politicians certainly at the top of that list as well. And now it's just, it's another discussion point in the world. It is not an automatic signal that you're dysfunctional or, some new ager or la la land kind of person. It's now part of mainstream thinking and reality.
Exactly, yeah. How do you see your role in ufology now then?
At this point in my career, the most consistently significant thing that I'm contributing is an opportunity for other people to be heard. You know that as a radio host as well. And the format that I use, which is live radio, where any errors are right there. They happen in live time, and that's okay. But in this age of increasingly short attention spans among the human race, this is a weekly full 2-hour conversation interview with somebody often in the world of UFO or paranormal studies, but not always. Artists, writers on different subjects, painters, film directors, actors, people who lives I feel are worth knowing about. And then coming up to, what they're involved in now, like a more conventional series of questions. Otherwise, continuing to work away on a number of different projects, speak when invited to, and at this moment, summer, working on my house, trying to keep up with the weeds in the garden, and conference in the future.
Well, you're always a busy man wherever you are around the world. You're always here, there, and everywhere. Why do you think humanity remains so seemingly divided regarding the subject of truly anomalies and UFOs and their implications for humanity?
I guess for a lot of people, let's look at it this way. When you take it down to the baseline, all fear is fear of the unknown. It can be everything from, is my marriage going to fall apart? Is the world going to explode? Are my kids going to turn out okay? Am I going to have health coverage as a older person? Is a spider going to get into my house? And, emblematic of fears of the unknown is the truly unknown, as in the unidentified flying object UAP phenomena. For a lot of people, and I know it was that way for me as a boy when I had my childhood sighting, it came down to everything that I thought I knew from the adult world was now open to question. And I was not comfortable with that at all. And so that became a central repressed memory for me, a story I've talked about certainly a number of times. But it, for some people, it means that the illusion of control, that the human race is the highest expression of intelligence this far, in the history of the cosmos, is open to change. For other people who are people of faith, but very fundamentalist, very inflexible in their attitudes, they may see aspects of this that challenge their beliefs, that this phenomena is demonic or some other mystical explanation, and better to kill the messenger, and attack the people who are trying to come at this from as scientific and as critical a point of view as possible, is preferable to accepting the possibility that we are not the biggest flea on the back of the cosmic dog.
Exactly, before we move on a little bit, because we're going to talk about the moon and Mars and what's your thoughts on things on the moon. Your thoughts on disclosure movements and how it's progressing in the States and in the UK and abroad. Do you think we're moving a bit closer then?
Well, there are two ways to think about disclosure with a capital D. One is that kind of storybook idea, which may or may not come to pass, of at a certain moment in the future, a scenario to the effect of all world leaders go on, national television at about the same time and tell their people the basics, that we're not alone in the universe, that we've been covering this up because we haven't wanted to deal with it, or we felt people would panic. And it is real, and we're not alone. Again, that may or may not come to pass, but as a process, disclosure has been growing unabated for more than 20 years in this country, in the UK especially. It's a process. Every time a new person maybe tunes in a program like yours and hears something that they find credible, and maybe takes the time to read a book or watch a documentary and reflects on it and thinks, there is something to this and I need to know more about it. That's disclosure. It's not happening like some mass movement. it's happening 1, 2, 7, 18 people at a time in any corner of the world, either by virtue of taking things more seriously after studying, or having their own sighting or event or incident or abduction or what have you. So one aspect of it, again, an official confirmation from world leadership, the United Nations and every world leader, basically, that we're not alone, that we've been lying about it, and that we need to begin to move into this next chapter of the human experience. It's still preferable to most of these people in power to let go as little as possible, to keep up the charade, the denial, even in this age of more and more interest by more and more powerful people. Kind of like a kabuki play or a soap opera of the grandest sort, that is informing us at the same time, possibly disinforming us to some degree or another. All we've got is our good common sense, a sense of deductive reasoning, and good human logic.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I know Mason just wants to answer a question. Good evening, Peter. It's truly a pleasure to see you. What do you believe they want from us? And do you think they pose a genuine threat or might even be dangerous or evil? Thank you.
Great question.
That's from Mason.
I appreciate it. First, we have to assume that there may well be, and does seem to be by the evidence that's come in over the decades, a number of thems, of civilizations, of beings, of intelligences that come and go or have a permanent presence here. Maybe the only thing they want from us is for us to stop poisoning our host organism, the Earth. Perhaps our little planet has a special relationship to other intelligences as well as us. Perhaps it's a point halfway between here and there in a journey that some beings traverse. Perhaps, and this is based on the fact that for decades now, we human beings have mastered the basic science of gene splicing and other sophisticated techniques to change the nature of basic organisms. Perhaps they've been doing that for eons, millennia, millions of years, we don't know. In that spirit, maybe we're somebody's graduate experiment gone quite wrong, and they're coming back to try to get a better mark. Or, there are friends, colleagues, folks who will tell you they know why they or them are coming. I don't know, but these are some of the possibilities. I think it's important to remember that if they were, really evil, we would probably be aware of it in terms of mass destruction or being completely subjugated. Perhaps they are to some degree in control, but, with puppet strings and humans that assist, it's all theoretical as far as I'm concerned, although, again, proofs are offered by some people, or what alleged to be proofs. Ultimately, we're in a completely unregulated field. In order to be a ufologist, you just have to call yourself one. You don't need to study or have a degree or take courses. There's no overriding organization to call somebody on a fabrication or a lie or misleading other people or unscrupulous behavior. So, we're all stuck with finally prove me wrong after I've laid out my, major theory here on what I know to be true. It's a bit of an existential joke in a way.
I know it is, I know. What about all these photos, NASA and Moon and Mars photos, that unprecedented resource in the battle for disclosure. For almost as long as human beings have been sending artificial satellites into space, we have been sending up artificial satellites which carry cameras. So, I'll just show you a few photos because
Yep.
I tried to get them up, but I know for a fact I can do it on here.
This is just an example of what we call pareidolia. It's a condition that we all have where we kind of look for and enjoy finding representational things in the randomness of nature, clouds, a hillside, what have you. And I include this material in the research project that I continue to be working away on regarding objects, formations, seeming organized construction on the surface of the moon and Mars that defy conventional explanation or are the result of pareidolia, that being the point.
Yeah, but when you look at some of them, you think, oh my God.
Well, that I take pride in. About 15 seconds earlier, it really looked like a poodle. That's a photograph of mine. Once I started the project, I started looking more actively for faces in nature because we're predisposed to wanting to see things like this. And, the game of finding a face, in a tree trunk or something like that. But again, the photos that we have, a number of them that are credible, that we do know the longitude, the latitude, the mission number, whether it was taken by a rover or obviously an overhead pass, that they don't belong there. Yeah, more of the pareidolia.
Exactly.
Again, just a hillside and, a profile, a seeming profile.
Yeah, it just makes you wonder. Well, then.
Yeah, let's talk about that for a moment. The famous face on Mars. In the early 1990s, researcher Richard Hoagland presented these photographic material and the surrounding area, which he named Cydonia. And in fact, it really does look like a face. And from a number of angles, it would be huge. Several miles across, and I forget, like more than a mile high. Quite a construction. Sometime after this, and after he published a book about it, NASA came back essentially saying, sorry, folks, we understand why you felt the way that you did. We hate to bust your bubble. But in fact, if you look at it from this angle with different lighting, and they showed a picture, which is in the file there, it's really nothing at all. Nothing to see here, folks. Move on. Back then, my thought was, gee, I really wanted, yeah, there you go, that to be a face. Wouldn't that be exciting? But okay, maybe I'm leaning too much into I want to believe kind of sensibility, and I let the thought go for years. Early last year, I became reinterested in the subject of these anomalies on Moon and Mars, and this memory of the dismissing of the face came back to me, and I thought, hang on, maybe the face is real, and perhaps this image is put forward by NASA to quell the public and have them lose interest. And would NASA do something like that? Well, very possibly. But it kind of introduced a lot of people to the idea of, and some of the other formations, by the way, in the Cydonia area also really don't seem quite natural. But there, again, these objects on Moon and Mars, oh, yes, it's one of the seeming tunnels. and of course we can't zoom in on this or um, see the details, but in fact, they're very unnatural, so to say.
Yeah, I know what you mean. This makes you wonder, doesn't it, Peter?
Yeah, and there's no way of dating these things, Bob. If there was or is continuing activity, right? This is in the Cydonia region, and it it has a configuration that is not that different from a number of ancient hill forts, some in the Middle East, some in the United Kingdom, in fact. And one has to ask, how did that right-angled sensibility, almost right-angled, come to pass? And it seems that we're looking into a controlled recess there. Again, not it's an ancient way to build a fortification. So more questions than answers for sure. The question from Rebecca King, and a very good question as well. Those of us who, stay interested in the subject or involved in the work, either as serious students or, just keep up on the news or, professionally involved, I think we tend to lose our focus. And we feel that because we and the people increasingly surrounding us and the ones we're in touch with seem to be ready for disclosure, that the general population on Earth is. I disagree. I think most of them are definitely not. Not that they wouldn't have to deal with it if it comes up quickly, but no, I think they're preoccupied with paying their bills, living their lives, and just this is not something they really think about much, especially right now in changing times and volatile times like this. And it will be a real shock to most of the people in the world, I believe. I have colleagues that say, they'll get used to it. But I think it's part of the challenge of what I'd call responsible disclosure, which sets up some really serious questions. How can you, let's say you're the prime minister and you're timing your talk to people of England and generally the UK, as well as the rest of the world. How can you make such an announcement and just sort of cut it off? We're not alone in the universe, and we're going to start declassifying more stuff, and you'll learn, without questions immediately coming up that are the last questions that officialdom wants asked. What's, if this is true, and I've, seen some documentaries and things, is that stuff about, missing pregnancies true? Is that stuff about have these beings that are part us, part them, underground bases and UFO abductions? How do you dig half a hole? And how, again, do you manage that flood of what some people will see as something approaching as panic? Others, maybe not so much. We don't know. And we've compounded our problem, we the human race controllers, so to say, by lying about it for so long. Well, in part, perhaps to keep our privileged positions privileged.
Yeah.
Once everybody knows, gee, it's, we'll lose all that cool bragging rights we have in our little circles here of being the insiders. Again, I'm just thinking out loud on this, but none of it's out of the question.
Yeah, it must be, like you say, it must be hard when it comes to that time where you've got to tell, in fact, the world about what's going to happen.
Bob, sometimes I wonder if they, or whatever portion of them we're talking about here, have in their collective minds that at a certain point, they're just going to make their presence known. There was a miniseries on American television in the 80s that was remade, I think, in, 20 years ago or so. It was pretty cheesy in most respects, but it had one of the most brilliant science fiction beginnings I've ever encountered. It was called V. And you may recall it, aliens come to Earth and they all look like fashion models and they're here to cure cancer and make peace and, all that stuff that goes back to that classic Twilight Zone episode, To Serve Man. It's a cookbook.
Yeah.
And then, we start to find out that they're not what they seem. And then it becomes every World War II movie you've ever seen, resisting the Nazis who are, But what I loved about it was it begins one morning. Everybody in the world wakes up and learns in TV, radio, whatever, that over the 50 or 60 biggest cities in the world, 1 mile up is a giant 1 mile across mothership. Game over. Done. I thought, well, that would do it.
That definitely would do it.
But to what effect? Would it throw the world's population into a total uncontrolled panic, or just be a moment of wonder and passing through the eye of the needle into a brave new world?
Oh my God, it would definitely. Yeah, I've still got some photos here, classic ones, on the moon.
Yes. When you look at this closely, it really looks like an apartment block on a hill. And the image on your phone is not terrible, but it doesn't give us the quality that we have in looking at the best enlargement that we can. At the same time, hillsides can form in jagged ways, and I have photos that play the devil's advocate here and show that phenomena. This, though, is not that. And there are quite a number of what seem to be constructions, developments of rectangular structures, and other ones that seem to be, a full area of a major city. Whether they've been abandoned for 50 million or 50,000 years or 500 years, or they're quietly still happening, we don't know. And if officialdom does know, it's just one more secret that they keep.
Oh, yeah, exactly. Yeah, it would do, yeah. But it does look, like you say, Peter, it does look like.
Yes, that one's quite impressive. And everything, it looks like pixelization, but it's not. It's little rectangle after rectangle after rectangle going up a hillside. And it's a huge enclave. It probably is hundreds of buildings. It looks like a city. Again, this is not some Photoshop nonsense. In the framing, which you can't read here, we have the mission number, the day it was filmed, the longitude and latitude, all of the relevant information that can be checked against a NASA database. It's very it's about as impressive as undoctored photographic information can be. And part of the challenge about presenting this material in a formal and informal way, I think, is all of us have gotten used to the highest quality production standards. We watch so many things on television in high definition.
Yeah, we do.
And everybody knows that a photographic image can be doctored to look perfectly real. And of course, on film as well, in the movies, it's a done deal. We can never trust another visual image in our lives. It can be doctored. At the same time, when you can present, this is the image, this is the longitude, the latitude, the mission number, etc., I think folks, especially say in the congressional investigations going on in the House of Representatives in America here, I can easily hear a representative involved in this, serious about the subject, saying, holy moly, even if what you're saying is true, I'm holding on to my credibility now. I'm involved in interviewing whistleblowers. If I say I take seriously a picture of the moon, a picture of a city on Mars seriously right now, it could be just the straw that breaks the camel's back. If it's real, that's fascinating, and I'd like to see more of it, but you can't expect me to just come right out, right? I can see that. So we have a challenge in how best to present this material to officialdom as well as the general public. Again, I think because of this certain group of researchers, not me, I'm completely out of it. The only thing I've done here of any significance is present the work of other people, which I continue to add to. And what they do, unlike, a lot of our colleagues in the UFO or paranormal world of research, their specialty is going over the best quality photographic prints available with a 10 power loop, micrometer by micrometer, to see if they can pick something up that, okay, this is important because that top photograph right there is taken from a rover. If it was a bit clearer, you would see that it's a significant pile of fairly large stones, and it's freestanding. It's, again, a pile of stones. It doesn't seem to be something that would have happened in nature on the surface of Mars. And then we look below at two cairns in, I think one of them is in the Orkneys. They're in the United Kingdom, and they're virtually identical, perhaps built for the same basic ancient purpose. We don't know. But there it is, and there they are. Could it be that simple? In this case, it might just be. There's no natural explanation for that construction. Simple Neolithic, area. You don't need any tools. You just pile up rocks.
It's true, that as well. Yeah. Totally agree with that.
Yeah.
I'll go to that one there. That's a fascinating one, is this one.
Oh, yes. This is, again, if we could see it clearer, you can see the little blue arrow on the far left, and then just diagonally up to the right, no arrow. There are two stones with some indentations, or so they appear here. But when we look at the enlargement, the one right after it, we see that they both, amazingly by chance, can you go to the next photo, Bob?
I can, yeah.
Yeah. Well, we'll wait till we look at them and you tell me what you think they look like.
There, look at that.
It could have formed in nature, I guess. It looks a little like a skull or part of a skull.
Yeah.
It's you can't dismiss it wholeheartedly. And there it is. It's one, the late great Stanton T. Friedman, wonderful man and a great ufologist. He had a category, said, that's in my gray bag, my gray box. The pun intended, I guess. But I don't know. It's worthy of interest.
It is, definitely a word of interest. There's that. Next one. David Garrett.
Yes, an independent researcher. And what are we looking at? It doesn't look natural. All those straight lines coming together the way that they are, and what seem to be organized triangular shapes. It looks like the remains of something not quite natural, and we don't know the scale. So that's another question here. But another one that is worthy of our attention and just doesn't seem to belong if we had a fuller picture of the area, with the terrain that we're seeing around it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It would be amazing, that would. Wait a minute. I get it.
Ah, it's not quite as dramatic here. We've been told for years that there is water on Mars, but it's frozen in the permafrost. And if we can get to it technologically, which apparently we can extract the water and create oxygen, etc. But these photos clearly show what appears to be water in craters on the surface of Mars. If not, it looks like a huge sheet of glass or plastic to simulate it or look like it. It's very dramatic, and if it's true, it's another thing that we've been completely misled about by NASA, JPL, and the forces that be.
Amazing photo, that one.
I think the one after it closes in on one of the craters and is, there you go.
Yeah, it does, yeah.
I mean, what the hell is that other than a recess with water in it? We've seen these things all our lives, unless you want to imagine it to be some kind of plastic shell, a huge construction covering. It depends how you choose to read it. But for me, it looks like something I've seen all my life in one way or another. After a rainstorm, it's a puddle.
Of course it is, yeah. It looks like it.
Again, no other explanations. No explanation has been put forth officially for that phenomena. Okay, yeah. The surface of the moon. What are those little, not quite rectangle, maybe rectangular subjects there just to the lower left of center?
Yeah, what are they?
They don't, again, I have to ask myself, always telling myself first, you are not a geologist, you are not a scientist, you don't know how to evaluate this information in a scientific manner. However, you're not stupid. And how those three little shapes could have formed in nature on the surface of the moon, you've got me.
Yeah. Exactly. Right, where's the next one?
Yes. What we see there.
Let's get it a bit further.
Yeah.
Right.
Is running right across the center at a slight diagonal is tracking. It's not straight. I mean, it's not a straight line. It's made up of a series of shapes, but it is a straight line running slightly diagonally through that area. Is it some kind of trail or transit system? Or, I can say to myself, well, maybe a little meteorite hit and skidded a few times. No, I don't think so.
I don't think so, no.
They hit and they make a crater. They stop.
Yes.
Once again, a right to the center right, we see this lone shape Again, if we could see it closer, it looks truly unnatural, like a huge dome,
Yes.
and casting a considerable shadow.
It does. That one does, yeah.
And even just saying that, I think I might have read that wrong. Sometimes the darks and lights, you see them opposite, and looking at them right now, this one is one of a series of configurations that NASA dismisses as something natural. This is on Mars. And for many of us, it looks like, dare I say it, an opening in this hillside that is rectangular and does not seem natural. I think that's fair to say.
It does look like a doorway.
Yep, it sure does. And if it was just that one example, who knows? Who am I to say not? But again, this is a closer look.
Let's get it back on again. That's it.
This is a close-up of the same configuration. And if that's not a doorway, an entrance, an opening that does not look natural, then I don't know what we're looking at.
Exactly.
Or how it can be formed in nature, more important.
It looks like a doorway completely.
Yeah. Again, we have to keep our critical facilities as sharp as we can in evaluating this material, because even if you're not aware of it, most of us want this to be true, unless, of course, you're a serious skeptic or debunker and want it to be untrue.
Yeah, I know what you mean there. Yeah.
And that is a different, couldn't be a doorway, but sure looks like one. I mean, really. It's on Mars, folks.
Yeah, exactly.
Again, we can all understand how this general subject dovetails into the subject of unidentified flying objects, UAPs, and the notion of visiting intelligences. Or again, the remains of a civilization.
Yeah.
This is an example of something really disturbing and at the same time confirmational. When I first started looking at these photos, I figured, again, somebody's going to Photoshop some weird stuff. It's going to get in here and they're going to think it's real. Those two distinct fuzzed out shapes, elongated, are retouching. And that's the way they were released to the public. This covering up, literally and figuratively, was done in-house by a NASA technician. And those would be extremely tall objects on the surface. We don't see them, but we see outrageously how they have been fused so that we can't make out the details. One can deduce from that we're being lied to by omission, so to say. And in a way that's kind of embarrassing. These cover-ups, literally and figuratively here, these cover-ups are so obvious.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
have many in the file that are part of the presentation that I gave, in fact, last year at Chris Evers' conference in Hull, Outer Limits Conference. And it's a subject I thought I would simply lay aside after that talk and move on to something else. But I've realized I've gotten quite a bit of feedback that a lot of people find this important and would like to know more about it and see more examples of it.
Yeah. Well, because there's been quite a few things on face on Mars, like glass tunnels and tube-like formations with reflection quality. The Tower of a Shard. There's been quite a few things
Hmm.
on the moon and Mars as well, aren't they?
Yeah, it's true.
Let's have a look now. What do you think is the most important about the work you and your colleagues are involved in at this time? You have now joined me as also weekly you interview people on your new show. What can you tell us about Meanwhile Here on Earth?
The show is live every Monday night between 7 and 9 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, 5 hours before you would receive it. In the UK, if you want to listen live, it starts at midnight and ends at 2 a.m. So if you're a night bird, great. What I pride myself on about the show is, again, as mentioned earlier in the program, I try to find interesting guests, many of them authors, but not always, and people who, in their area of public life, have gained the respect of folks that follow their subject. My question in every episode, literally, unless we're having panel discussions on any number of subjects, is how did you become the person you are? And often we spend at least the first hour of the show giving them an opportunity to do the kind of interview that they rarely do, which is tell us, to whatever degree they would like to, the story of their lives, illustrated or not. And then in the latter part of the show, we understand all the better how they became involved in the field that they did and the work that they're doing. And then, when are you going to speak next and that kind of thing. I know I could do it as a podcast, which simply means pre-recording it, but I like the idea of live radio and grew up with it, of course, like you did.
Yeah.
Things screw up more often than you'd imagine. There's,
It does. Yeah.
things go
People,
wrong.
people
And
just don't realize. As soon as you start talking about the subject, UFOs, anything to do with that, or the governments, all of a sudden your program can go down.
I've had to, I've been taken off the air several times by electrical storms, by the failure of, my or a guest's setup. And overall, though, it keeps things as live and lively as possible. Also, when somebody has 2 hours to talk about themselves and their work, more often than they imagine, what I've observed over hundreds of interviews now over the years is that they sometimes begin to talk about something they've never talked about before, certainly not in public. And I think some of them have shown real courage in airing a part of their life where they went through a really terrible tragedy, or a challenge that helped to make them the person that they are by facing it and dealing with it. Some of the shows have been extremely funny, as things are. Every once in a while, we will stop and do a memorial show for, a beloved colleague who is gone.
Yeah.
But I think the most important thing, again, that I can be doing right now, besides developing whatever project I'm involved in next, is being a facilitator, uh, being somebody who can give others voice. Some of them not very well known, some of them very well known, others very well known in a particular area of study. And I find it really one of the high points of my week to come back on and be there with an extremely interesting person, learning about them, sometimes having some fun, other times some pretty serious times on the air.
Oh God, yeah. You know, Trump's just come in now again for another term and everything like that. When you talk about UFOs and anything like that, who actually runs the world?
Hmm. Boy, ain't that the big question. It's something that conspiracists, for lack of a better term, have wondered about probably for millennia. Originally, it was probably a priest scientist class in ancient civilizations. Um, I think it's in our world, Bob, the folks who we don't hear about, the people behind the scenes who own the world of banks,
Yeah.
who own most of the real estate on the planet, who are connected to all of the other most powerful people, who stage manage to some degree the drama that we call history.
Hey, Peter, do we still have a Majestic 12?
Good question. If we don't, it has probably evolved into whatever it would have evolved into next. Again, whether or not there are 12 people, I would guess is not true anymore, or it's not relevant. It was just the number of the individuals originally advisors around Truman on the subject. But if there's not an MJ12 type organization within the American government going on, and an equivalent perhaps within the UK government, there are working groups within our civilian and military intelligence agencies that probably have assumed some of that work. Again, MJ12 was formed in 1947 by President Harry Truman to get to the bottom of this flying saucer phenomenon, whatever it is. And the chances are excellent that we have not gotten to the bottom of it, to put it mildly. In fact, I think we still know a huge amount less than we know.
We do. I
And
agree with that, Peter. We haven't gone too far. There's still a lot of out there, but we don't know about.
I think also, Bob, people say, why are these secrets continue to be kept? To give up the secret would be tremendously embarrassing to the secret keepers. They would have to admit to being co-conspirators in the largest cover-up in human history, along with every American president and probably prime minister and selected other world leaders. And they're not keen to do that. They're not keen to be identified. There are certain very powerful, wealthy families that have been with us for a long time, and groups that, are real or mythical or part both. But yeah, strings are being pulled. I certainly don't know the depths to the degree of which.
Oh God, yeah. I've always said that it's the billionaires who control the
Also,
planet.
Bob, you know, right before, well, President Kennedy was inaugurated, uh, President Eisenhower, who was stepping down, um, gave some brief comments, and one of them still resonates with many of us from a more innocent time of the autumn of 1960, when that peaceful change of power took place. And it was simply, beware of the military industrial complex. They own us all in a certain way. And what a glorious time to be an arms merchant, or, a weapons manufacturer or dealer. I mean, it's
Yeah.
always a good time to be involved in war. We seem to be addicted to it, and it's part of the drive mechanism of the world economy. You think about all of the wasted material, not to mention lives and dreams,
Oh, yeah.
in Gaza and the Ukraine all by themselves over the last years. It's mind-boggling.
They must look at us, the aliens or whoever they may be, think, all they want to do is blow each other up.
That's right. And this is a point that's come up in science fiction as well as within serious working groups within governments. How can we, as a species, even begin to advance our own cause or have behavior acceptable to intelligences that perhaps uh, don't have to full-time murder each other to live their lives and have their civilizations? Certainly, we are still in our own modern way doing what true primitives did, drawing a line in the dirt and essentially saying, this side of the line is mine. If you cross it, you will have a problem. And somebody does, and two people start fighting. Welcome to the history of the human race.
Mason just said Jimmy Carter tried to get to the bottom of it. He didn't get anywhere.
Yes, he did. And we now know that once he became president, he had a meeting with the director of NASA, a distinguished, certainly a worthy scientist of that position, and said he wanted to transfer studies on the subject of UFOs and everything related them to NASA. The Air Force had declared themselves out of business, in 1969, although they continued on, of course.
Yeah.
And the head of NASA, in so many words, said, you can do what you want, Mr. President, but if you do, you will have my resignation on your desk very shortly thereafter. His reason was, at that point, in the 70s, NASA's budget was pretty hard pressed. And just the thought that that scientific agency would be associated with a subject that the great, majority of people thought was nonsense could really not just undercut, but terribly damage NASA and its mission. And Carter backed off. And, that's the way it went.
Because when you look back, it's not long ago when we got the mobile phone, tellies went from being massive to about an inch thick. All that technology came at all the same time. Where did that come from?
Now, there's a question that I ask myself regularly as one of the most untechnologically aware people I know. I feel like a digital man trapped, an analog man trapped in a digital world. For me, it's one step away from magic. And the internet itself, how could that have happened? Just by human beings thinking of every possible question anybody might ask in the whole history of the world. And, 49 times out of 50, you hit your search engine with the question there. And, one or two hits, you'll get your answer of, what Beethoven's wife's cousin's name was or whatever.
Anything you need to know now, you can find out.
It's like the mind of the great deity. It goes beyond anything that I can conceive of having been intelligently constructed, as opposed to, it's easier just to say, well, it's the gift of the aliens. Although in this case, it's like,
Yeah.
you think about technology that we were born into, the highly sophisticated world of radios with tubes in them, and the magic of the telephone and the telegraph and television, and how it's now all rather charming and antiquated, within the addition of the speed of the growth of artificial intelligence in all of our lives increasingly. Damned if I know. We are surrounded by so many more mysteries than answers in the relatively conventional world that we live in, of electronics and human affairs, as well as this other area of intelligence that you and I have a particular focus on.
So I'm going to briefly end of the show. What you got planned for the future? Where can people find you if they want to get in touch with you? And if you've got any books out there, just let us know where they can get them.
My website is hopelessly outdated, so I've taken it down for now. We'll be updating it. If you're not on Facebook, get on Facebook. It's where you can most easily contact me. The 3 books that I've written are all out of print, and they will stay out of print. That's the way that goes. I have a documentary on the life and death of a very significant American, our first Secretary of Defense, James Forrestal. My contention being that he was murdered following a profound breakdown after leaving his position, in part exacerbated by all he knew and was unable to do anything about the UFO phenomenon. My next appearance will be at a wonderful event in Exeter, New Hampshire. The incident at Exeter is a very important UFO event and a landing in that beautiful state. Several of the primary witnesses were local police officers, and that case is 60 years old this year, so it's going to be a very special conference, and that comes the last weekend in August. And we should mention here that a good friend of ours, Chris Evers, is having a conference that is coming up, on the 13th of September.
Yeah, I think so, yeah. I think it's in Gould.
No, it's in Cottingham.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Yeah, here it is. UFO conference, Saturday, the 13th of September, in Cottingham Civic Hall, 1 Market Green, Cottingham. Go to the Outer Limits magazine Facebook page for the particulars. It's a great lineup of speakers. Only wish that you and I could be there to join them.
Exactly. That would have been wonderful, Peter. It would have been. That's the last time we spoke at a conference in Hull.
Yep. And let's hope there are more to follow.
I'm sure there will be. But thank you, Peter, for coming on the show. It's been wonderful, as always.
Bob, it's a pleasure to be back on, and let's not wait so long until the next time.
Exactly. Yeah, because it goes ever so quickly. I'll just get my diary. Oh, yeah. I think you met this guy as well. On Friday, it's Nick Kyle from Scotland. We're going to talk about the skull experiment, going to talk about the paranormal in Brazil when he went out there. Lots of different things on Friday. That's the 11th of July. 2 o'clock Eastern, 11 o'clock Pacific, and 7 p.m. in the UK. Nick Kyle is on Friday. And I think next week, oh yeah, Jessica Jones next Wednesday. That's the 16th of July. And then on the 18th, I've got Jeremiah Osman. Now he's something different. That will be very good. It's about Bradshaw Ranch, that one. I do know about that one. So there's a few really good guests coming up in the next couple of weeks. So hopefully you have to tune in out of nowhere. It's live on YouTube as well. So thank you, Peter. Thank you to everybody in the chat room for the questions as well. It's always nice for people to have a few questions. It's different. You take care, Peter.
You too, Bob.
Have a lovely afternoon.
Thank you, my friend. I will. And a great evening to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'll tell... I don't know if Paul's gone out tonight or not. He might have gone out because it's not a bad night out there. Otherwise, he'd have probably been up here, or he might be in shed listening to it. Right.